At the side seam, the waist is straight along the waistline, and at the side seam, it breaks off into two different seams. I've pinned the bow up so we can actually see what's going on underneath it. I usually like to kind of pencil sketch out the foundation of what's happening before I add decoration on top. So there's this little triangular yoke seam, and the top part of it goes upwards, and the bottom part of it goes downwards. And I measured up from the waist, and it's about 1.5 inches or so up to here. And then below the waist, the point goes down 4 inches. Okay, so I've already marked in my seam line. This isn't something you would ink right away because the bow will be covering part of it. But I kind of like to know where it is because the bow won't be covering all of it, and that way I can just ink in the parts that the bow's not covering. Okay. So from here, do you see how this 6-inch flounce kind of continues down and follows that angle? There's wiggliness happening, but there's kind of a general trend for where that's going. So this little peplum kind of intersection that you should have traced off when it's time for the back piece, that's just going to continue down. And you'll just give yourself a guideline, just saying this is kind of where that peplum is going to be. Okay? And then at some point, both of these sides of the peplum start twisting together to create this cascade stuff. Right? Okay. Now, above this waist area, what's happening? So this front panel wraps around, right? And then that front panel kind of gathers up, and then there's a little tie attached to it. Are you seeing that? Mm-hmm. And there's a little kind of keyhole gap. I don't know, depending on how the bow falls, we might see a little bit of that keyhole gap. So I've drawn in a little bit of a keyhole. Now I know where the top of the tie might be. If I were to draw in this line, where would it connect to? It would connect to this intersection right here. Okay? So we've got a little bit of, there's a kind of a steep curve happening, but it's going to appear to be even more steep than that because we've got this kind of wrapping around foreshortening happening. So when you go to connect it, there's going to be kind of a dramatic dip before it joins. A dramatic dip before it joins up here. The rest of it. Okay. And I don't know what's necessarily going to show when the bow actually happens, but there is a seam there where the bow gets tied, or where the straps for the bow get sewn. So this is sort of what I see when I look underneath. Are you guys seeing it? Come up here. You can't see from back there. Come closer. We've got lots of room. Megan, come on over. Okay. Now, there will be stuff inside here. And I'm going to tell you it's not the same as what's happening on the outside of the garment. So after we've all kind of looked and sketched out the back, we're going to take it off the form, and we're going to look and see what's happening inside. Okay? So, cascade. How does it work? So we've got this kind of wavy line, and then there's one side of the cone, another side of the cone, one side of the cone, other side of the cone. So we can actually start off with one of the wavy lines and then figure out where the cones go from there. So just a reminder what it's kind of looking like. The wavy line might be something like that. And then we would figure out where the cones go from there. So this one, you need to kind of imagine like a center line, I think, helps a little bit. Because there's this cut edge that you see. And that cut edge would be going straight, okay? So your cones would be aiming towards that center line. If the fabric was see-through, they would actually connect. And this cone would be aiming towards that center line. And if the fabric was see-through, it would connect. Are you seeing that? So we want to make sure they're pointing, all of them are pointing towards die, however, has two of them going into one. Okay, so I'm going to use a different color to show how we could do the second one. There's a second wavy line, and it's nestled inside the first. Okay, you guys seeing that? Okay, so it's not going to be perfectly equidistant. Sometimes the wavy line, the second wavy line might be really close. Sometimes there might be bigger gaps. There's going to be a wavy line near it that's not identical. Okay, that's kind of going in with it. Okay, and then we have to figure out where the cone shapes of that wavy line are. Okay, so if I start drawing this side, I'm going to be aiming up this way. When do I stop? When I hit that blue line, it's going to stop. Okay? This one, I'm going to aim this way. When do I stop? When I hit the purple one. And so this one will just be a little partial one. Okay? Would this guy show, this blue line? No. No, so that would then not get inked in. This would not get inked in. So I kind of like to sketch them both in and then figure out what parts are going to get inked and what parts aren't. Okay, you seen that? Okay. So the trick is the cascade is starting from the peplum. So our wavy line has to, the top edge of the wavy line needs to come from the peplum. Okay? So this edge is going to start the wavy line action. Okay, that's going to continue from there. And this one is going to start its partner. Okay, so you're going to extend from there. Everybody following? Okay. So once we've got kind of the edges, we can then figure out the cone stuff. We can do our little smile, frown. Well, you get the idea. Whatever we were doing before. Smile, frown, and maybe there's a partial one that kind of waves first. And then as far as the cone shapes here go, you're going to rule up on this side till you hit the edge. Rule up on this side and hit the edge. And all the while you're pointing as if you're going to be hitting this line somewhere up here. You're not going to draw in all of that. This side, you would rule up just to the purple. Just to the purple. Okay? Now when I go to put this one in, just draw this side until it hits. Draw this side until it hits. Draw this side until it hits, and so forth. Okay, so just like I did over here, you just put it inside there. Okay? Have I lost anybody yet? No? Good. All right. There would also be gathers. Okay, do you see how there's wrinkles coming out of there? Maybe indicate where they might be, just so you know they're there. But they may or may not get inked in. But know that if any portion of the bow is sagging, there would be some gathers peeking out from behind it. Do we see any top stitch anywhere? Right, yeah, this little yoke right on this deep V. So we would have some top stitch in here. Anywhere else? Before we get to the bow, we'll do the bow last. Oh, okay. Look at this. There's a little flounce at the bottom of this skirt. It wasn't there in the front. We had a godet in the front. There's a new little piece of fabric, a new flounce sewn to the bottom edge, and that's making the bottom of the skirt even more full. Okay? See if I can raise it up. Did you see here? There's this flounce, and it's uneven. It's narrow, and it gets wider and wider and wider as it goes up. So while all of this is going on, we actually also have another seam. Did anyone measure this? 6 inches at the side. kind of meets up at center back is 12-ish. Okay. So over here, 6 inches from the side. So it's kind of mimicking. If that's 6 inches, that's also 6 inches. And maybe around here, there's a seam that, if you could see it, if you could lift everything up, it would go all the way up here. And it's kind of swooping down. Okay, swooping up. And we see stitches. Is it above the seam or below? Below. But all of this is built on the framework of what's going on. Now, the ripples, you see there's ripples happening because it's going in and out of the flares. You may not want to draw it perfectly like that. You might want to draw it like the seam is going over the cone and in the cone, and over the cone and in the cone. That would give it maybe more of a realistic look. Okay, and you're seeing how this seam, if I laid it flat, would be a perfect partial circle. But because it's going over and under and in, it's kind of undulating a little bit. Both ways work. If you want to have a more realistic illustratory feel, I would have the lines go in and out. If you want it to look more technical pattern making, you would just draw the swoop of the lines. Both ways absolutely work. Okay. Anything else before we get to the bow? Do you see anything else?
What's the zipper thing?
Yeah, there is a little zipper pull here, and it's that same kind of invisible zipper. So depending on how the bow falls, you may or may not see it. Okay, but if there's a gap there, put it in, right? And there's an opening, right? So there would be a heavy line where you could unzip it, and then at some point it would stop. But all this stuff is happening, so you won't see it. So I'm going to pull the bow down, and it looks different every time you tie it. Make it a prettier bow than it might actually be. Okay. The bow, I like to draw a bow in 5 components. A loop, a tail, and a knot. And if I was drawing just like a cutesy little ribbon bow, I would have the knot, and maybe the knot has a little dent in it. I might have a loop. Things like Minnie Mouse. Right? You might see that on the top of a toddler head or whatever. And then the loops themselves, you're going to show the front and the back of what's happening. So I might draw this bottom edge with kind of a little bit of a lift for the top edge, or maybe one on one and one on the other. And this is going to let us know that there's actually a loop happening. Okay? Now, as far as the little ties go, and again, this is not the kind of bow that's happening here. This is much looser and floppier. As far as the ties go, one tie usually comes out from behind one of the loops, and you could cut it at an angle, or you could even cut it like a little snake tongue or whatever. Where's the other tie? You guys have all tied your shoelaces all the time, right? One of them goes behind the loop. What happens with the other one? Have you ever looked at your shoelaces when you tie them? It comes out the front. One comes out the back, and one comes out the front. Now there's sneaky ways of tying it, like bending the bows different ways to make it, to force it to go behind. But the nature of actually tying a bow, this comes through the front of the knot, and this one comes from the back of the knot. And this is just a regular bow, so that's happening here. You can kind of sort of collapse on itself. Let's make it prettier. So you can see right here, this tie is in front of that loop, and this tie is behind it. And it really just depends on which you pulled over what. Okay? And you can see that maybe on this one you might see the opening at the top, and maybe on this one I kind of see it more at the bottom. Right? So this one is just sort of a sloppy mess of a bow, but it still has those same components. It's just that the loops are falling, and the ties are sort of folding up on themselves, and they're a little bit longer, and they're not equally long, because it's sort of more rough. So after you get the foundation all sketched in, you'll look at it, and I'll do it in green so you can see how it interacts with everything else. The knot is going to cover most of this area. And the knot is kind of like a round rectangle, something like that. It can have wrinkles in the top, it can have wrinkles in the bottom, but it's basically a round rectangle. Okay? And then if we look at the loop, maybe it's doing something like this. And maybe it's dented down here too. Maybe there's a little bit of a kind of gather. And what we decided that it's opening on the top edge here. Maybe I'd have the opening there. And this other loop is flopping down. And I wouldn't trace each side. They're tied differently. And somebody last semester was just having like anxiety about drawing over top of her drawing. What she did, she actually drew the bow separately and pasted it on top after she was done. So if you're having like, my bow is going to ruin everything, draw a few bows off on this side and paste it on top if you want to. Okay, so then my tie on this side is going over the bow, and my tie on this side is going behind the bow. And what do we see? What do we see at the bottom? Sort of angled. Like that. But sort of collapsing on itself. So it's really just a draw what you see kind of a thing. If you're having trouble drawing from light, I think I made a suggestion last week, photograph it. When you're on the computer, if you're having trouble drawing, like somebody wanted to draw a cargo pocket yesterday. How do I draw a cargo pocket? I had her find a photograph of a cargo pocket, bring it into Illustrator and trace it. Like that's absolutely a doable kind of a thing. Okay. So this I just sort of fold it over. Okay. And maybe there's some little gather lines coming out of the knot area. And now that looks like a big, big, big mess. Okay? But at least I have all the information. So when it's time for me to ink in, I can decide I need to ink this seam to here. I need to ink this seam to here. I might see a little bit of it through there. I definitely see this. I definitely see this. I don't need any of this information. Okay? And the way I just drew this here, somebody asked about the zipper. You see, I have a gap in my drawing. So for mine, I would absolutely draw a little zipper. And a not medium, but bold line going down. If you happen to see it the way you drew it. Okay? I'm going to expect that everybody's bows are differently done, because some people have already sketched it, and I just retied it. So it's going to look different for everybody. Everybody's going to kind of have a different gesture, and that's fine. Okay? Questions on this? Probably have some gathers coming out of it, right? No? All right, so that's back to you. In a little bit, after everybody's done their sketches or taken photos, whatever you want to do, we'll pull it off and we'll look